George Orwell's Animal Farm was never just a children's fable about barnyard politics. It was a deliberate, razor-sharp intervention into the political consciousness of the 20th century. Writing in the shadow of the Second World War and the brutal consolidation of Soviet power, Orwell laid out his purpose with unflinching clarity in his essay Why I Write. He explained that the novella was born from a profound condemnation of false leadership and a commitment to exposing the consequences of totalitarianism. At its core, the work operates as a masterfully constructed political allegory and a biting satire. In literary terms, political allegory uses symbolic characters and narratives to mirror real-world ideological struggles, while satire employs irony, exaggeration, and ridicule to critique systemic failures. How did Orwell fuse these forms? He used them to dissect exactly how revolutionary fervor can be hijacked by ambition, and how utopian promises are systematically dismantled by those who claim to champion them. Scholars note that the novel structure transcends mere literary devices, for it has entered the conceptual political lexicon as a shorthand for dictatorship itself. The title alone instantly conjures imagery of authoritarian consolidation, historical revisionism, and the betrayal of collective ideals. Rather than offering a dry ideological takedown, Orwell shifts our focus toward the actual mechanics of power. Drawing implicitly upon Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince, particularly the maxim that it is much safer to be feared than loved, the narrative exposes how authority is never simply inherited or elected. Instead, it is manufactured through surveillance, linguistic manipulation, and the strategic cultivation of terror. Orwell's intent was always to strip away the romantic veneer of revolution and lay bare the institutional architecture of control, making the text a timeless diagnostic tool for recognizing how power corrupts when left unchecked. The narrative arc of Animal Farm traces a devastating trajectory from liberation straight to subjugation. It begins at Manor Farm, a decaying estate owned by the negligent and alcoholic Mr. Jones, whose mismanagement perfectly mirrors systemic neglect. After the bore-old Major delivers a stirring speech about animal exploitation and envisions a society free from human tyranny, the animals stage a successful rebellion. They drive Jones away and rename the estate Animal Farm. They establish 7 commandments grounded in the philosophy of animalism, with the most sacred rule being that all animals are equal. Initially, the pigs assume administrative duties, organizing labor, managing resources, and spreading the revolution ideals. Boxer, the loyal cart horse, embodies the working class, tirelessly repeating that he will work harder, while the animals celebrate their newfound autonomy. But why does this utopian experiment so quickly fracture? As the pigs consolidate administrative control, they begin to privilege themselves, moving into the farmhouse, sleeping in beds, and consuming alcohol. A fierce ideological and tactical rivalry erupts between 2 leading pigs, Napoleon and Snowball, culminating in a violent power struggle. Napoleon, having secretly raised a litter of ferocious dogs, uses them to chase Snowball off the farm. From that exact moment, the rebellion democratic pretenses vanish. Napoleon establishes a one-pig dictatorship, utilizing the silver-tongued Squealer to manipulate language, rewrite history, and alter the 7 commandments to justify every new privilege. The Windmill, once Snowball visionary project, becomes Napoleon emblem of forced labor and propaganda. Through staged trials, public executions, and the perpetual manufacture of external and internal threats, the pigs institutionalize fear. The novella concludes with a chilling scene of institutional capture. The surviving animals peer through the farmhouse window to see the pigs dining with human farmers, playing cards, and arguing indistinguishably from their former oppressors. The final, altered commandment reads that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Orwell thus stages exactly how revolutions can effortlessly reproduce the very hierarchies they promise to uproot. Animal Farm functions as a precise, sustained allegory of the Russian Revolution and the subsequent rise of Stalinist authoritarianism. Orwell deliberately maps the farm geography and events onto early Soviet history, transforming the novella into a historical mirror. Mr. Jones represents Tsar Nicholas II, the detached and incompetent monarch whose failures ignite the revolutionary spark. Old Major, with his visionary rhetoric and early death, stands for Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, the ideological architects whose theories inspire the uprising but who do not live to see its institutionalization. The farm itself symbolizes Russia, and the rebellion directly parallels the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. As the narrative unfolds, the allegorical parallels grow increasingly exact. The initial period of collective labor and egalitarian rhetoric mirrors the early Soviet experiments in workers' control. However, the gradual centralization of power among the pigs reflects the Bolshevik vanguard consolidation of authority. The expulsion of Snowball directly mirrors Leon Trotsky's exile from the Soviet Union. While Napoleon's rise to absolute power tracks Joseph Stalin's ruthless elimination of political rivals. The use of trained dogs as a secret police force parallels the NKVD and the apparatus of state terror. The forced labor campaigns, purges, and show trials echo the 5-year plans and the Great Purge, where dissent was framed as treason. Orwell Allegory does not merely retell history. It critiques the ideological betrayal at its core. Socialism's original promise of human equality was systematically dismantled by a new ruling class that adopted the very mechanisms of oppression they had overthrown. Scholars emphasize that the book schema has become so culturally embedded that it universally signifies the corruption of revolutionary ideals, making it an enduring critique of how totalitarianism spreads by arresting human dignity in the name of productivity and control. The ideological and personal clash between Napoleon and Snowball forms the novel's central axis, offering a profound study in contrasting leadership archetypes and the mechanics of political survival. Snowball is depicted as vivacious, intellectually agile, and deeply committed to the practical betterment of animal life. He drafts plans for the windmill, organizes committees to educate the animals, and genuinely believes in spreading animalism beyond the farm borders. His character aligns closely with Leon Trotsky, serving as an intellectual, a strategist, and a revolutionary idealist whose vision extends to international solidarity. Yet, Snowball's fatal flaw lies in his underestimation of brute force and political maneuvering. He believes in the power of debate, democratic consensus, and the inherent goodness of the collective. Napoleon, by contrast, is quiet, brooding, and ruthlessly pragmatic. Where Snowball relies on rhetoric and innovation, Napoleon relies on organization, intimidation, and the strategic accumulation of loyalists. His early decision to secretly rear puppies, which later mature into a vicious private guard, reveals a deep Machiavellian understanding that ideological purity simply cannot withstand organized violence. Once in power, Napoleon abandons public debate entirely, replacing it with staged rallies, manipulated statistics, and the systematic rewriting of truth. His rule demonstrates that power is sustained not through persuasion, but through the engineering of consent and the cultivation of perpetual crisis. The rivalry aftermath is equally telling. Snowball is transformed into a perpetual scapegoat. Every failure, from broken windmill walls to stolen crops, is blamed on his alleged sabotage. This mirrors Stalin's demonization of Trotsky, who was painted as a traitor and foreign agent to justify internal purges. Napoleon's propaganda apparatus, led by Squealer, ensures that Snowball's historical contributions are erased, proving Orwell's warning about how language and ritual can be weaponized to capture institutional memory. Ultimately, the Napoleon-Snowball dynamic encapsulates the novel core thesis. When revolutionary movements prioritize control over equality, the idealists are exiled or executed, and the pragmatists become tyrants. Their conflict is not merely a struggle for farm leadership. It is a timeless dramatization of how the corruption of power begins not with malice, but with the quiet substitution of principle for control. The revolutionary promise of Manor Farm begins as a collective awakening. A vision where labor yields dignity and the fruits of the harvest belong to those who till the soil. Yet George Orwell's satire meticulously charts how quickly emancipatory ideals fracture under the weight of unchecked authority. At the heart of this decay lies the fundamental asymmetry of influence that social psychology identifies as the boundary between persuasion versus manipulation. While persuasion operates with a degree of transparency and mutual benefit, manipulation conceals its mechanisms, leaving its targets completely unaware of the psychological architecture being constructed around them. In Animal Farm, the pig's gradual monopolization of power mirrors this precise shift. Initially, Napoleon and Snowball share leadership, debating policy, and mobilizing the animals through collective assemblies. But as the regime consolidates, the farm transitions from a participatory commons to a rigid oligarchy. The expulsion of Snowball, the privatization of resources like milk and apples, and the deployment of the guard dogs are not merely plot points. They are structural demonstrations of how power reconfigures itself to serve its own preservation. The working animals, conditioned to equate obedience with survival, accept their diminishing returns as necessary sacrifices. How does this class struggle manifest so quietly? Orwell reveals that corruption does not arrive as a sudden betrayal, but as a slow recalibration of norms. The pigs do not seize power through brute force alone. They engineer consent by positioning themselves as the indispensable architects of the revolution. As critical scholars note, the basis of dominating ideology is power. And linguistic and social frameworks are routinely adjusted to benefit those who control the narrative. The erosion of equality is thus not an accident of governance, but a deliberate outcome of power's inherent tendency to concentrate, insulate, and ultimately consume the very ideals that birthed it. If force secures the regime perimeter, language sustains its interior. Squealer, the regime chief orator, operates as the living embodiment of what communication theorists term the engineering of consent through mass suggestion and psychological manipulation. Orwell's satire exposes how propaganda functions not merely as deception, but as a systematic reconstruction of reality. Squealer's speeches are masterclasses in rhetorical displacement. He replaces empirical observation with statistical abstraction, substitutes historical memory with urgent necessity, and weaponizes fear to neutralize doubt. When the animals question why the pigs consume the milk and apples, Squealer does not defend privilege. He reframes it as biological imperative and collective defense against Mr. Jones' return. This aligns precisely with the theoretical understanding that propaganda is rarely about outright falsehood. Rather, it selectively deploys truth, amplifies anxiety, and redirects loyalty toward the institution rather than the ideal. The manipulation deepens as language itself becomes an instrument of control. The 7 commandments, once carved in unambiguous moral code, are quietly altered under cover of night. Words are stretched, clauses are appended, and contradictions are smoothed over by sheer rhetorical repetition. In one chilling demonstration of this linguistic capture, a minor poet composes verses praising the leader. And Napoleon approved of this poem and caused it to be inscribed on the wall of the big barn, at the opposite end from the 7 commandments. This physical juxtaposition is deeply symbolic, as the original covenant of equality is literally overshadowed by the cult of personality. As discourse analysts observe, language in such systems is used not to establish truth, but to manufacture belief. Squealer's success lies in his understanding that when discourse is monopolized, reality becomes negotiable. The animal's inability to articulate their grievances stems not from stupidity, but from the systematic dismantling of the very vocabulary needed to describe oppression. The tragedy of Animal Farm is not that the revolution fails, but that it succeeds in producing a new ruling class that speaks the old language while practicing the opposite virtues. Orwell traces the subversion of animalism from a doctrine of liberation into a theological justification for hierarchy. The initial slogan that all animals are equal functions as a moral anchor, but as the pigs consolidate authority. The phrase is hollowed out and repurposed. Ideological decay follows a predictable trajectory. First, ideals are celebrated. Then, they are deferred for practical necessity. Finally, they are inverted to legitimize the very structures they once opposed. The analysis of ideology as a framework that confuses ideological claims for fact illuminates this process. The pigs do not abandon animalism. They simulate it. They maintain the rituals, the anthems, and the terminology, but strip them of their emancipatory content. This creates what theorists describe as a short circuit of reality, where signs are detached from their original meanings and reattached to serve power. The working animals, particularly the loyal cart horseboxer, internalize this distortion. His mantra that he will work harder, and his blind faith in Napoleon wisdom, demonstrate how manipulated populations often double down on their own exploitation when alternative frameworks of understanding have been erased. The revolution promise of freedom is replaced by a new form of alienation, where labor is no longer a path to dignity but a mechanism of subjugation. Orwell's satire warns that when ideological language is severed from accountability, it becomes a tool of domination. The final erosion of the commandments culminates in the infamous revision that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This logical impossibility is not a writing error. It is the regime's ultimate confession. Language has been so thoroughly corrupted that it now openly celebrates its own hypocrisy, proving that the perversion of ideals is complete when the lie no longer needs to disguise itself as truth. Orwell's allegorical precision relies heavily on recurring symbols that operate as both narrative anchors and political diagnostics. The windmill, perhaps the novel's most potent motif, transcends its literal function as an energy source to become a symbol of coerced modernization and the exploitation of labor. Initially championed by Snowball as a means to reduce toil and improve living conditions, the windmill is seized by Napoleon as a vehicle for state-driven industrialization and military preparedness. Its repeated destruction and reconstruction mirror the cyclical nature of authoritarian economies. Perpetual crisis justifies perpetual sacrifice, while the ruling class remains insulated from the physical toll. The farm itself functions as a microcosm of the nation-state, a space where cultural memory, economic production, and political authority intersect. As scholars suggest, such spaces become centers for manufacturing both commodities and compliant workers. Reflecting the contradictions of societies that claim egalitarianism while practicing extraction. The flag, bearing the green banner with the white hoof and horn, undergoes a similar transformation. Once a symbol of interspecies solidarity, it is gradually stripped of its revolutionary context and repurposed as a marker of state loyalty. Specific animals further deepen the allegory. Napoleon and Snowball embody the Stalin-Trotsky rivalry. With Napoleon representing the bureaucratic consolidation of power and Snowball the exiled intellectual whose ideas are retroactively vilified. Boxer symbolizes the exploited proletariat, whose strength and loyalty are harvested until he is no longer useful. Even the barn wall, where the commandments are painted, becomes a palimpsest of historical revisionism. Its surface literally rewritten to match the regime-shifting needs. Through these symbols, Orwell demonstrates how political allegory operates not as mere historical parallel, but as a structural critique. The windmill, the flag, the animals, and the farm collectively map the life cycle of a revolution, moving from utopian aspiration through ideological capture to institutionalized tyranny. In doing so, Animal Farm endures not just as a satire of a specific historical regime, but as a timeless examination of how power, language, and symbolism intertwine to reshape human consciousness. In the realm of political allegory, few works resonate with the enduring power and incisive wit of George Orwell Animal Farm. This novella, a seemingly simple tale of barnyard rebellion, is, in fact, a masterful satirical critique. A potent weapon forged in the crucible of Orwell observations of totalitarianism and the corruption of power. Orwell wields satire and irony like a surgeon's scalpel, dissecting the absurdities and hypocrisies that fester within totalitarian regimes. The very premise of animals overthrowing their human oppressors to establish a more equitable society is inherently ironic, setting the stage for the profound betrayal that follows. The pigs, initially the most intellectual of the animals, quickly ascend to positions of power, subtly manipulating the other farm inhabitants through carefully crafted slogans and a perversion of truth. Squealer, the master propagandist, embodies the insidious nature of totalitarian rhetoric. His ability to twist facts, create convenient scapegoats, and enforce the pig's agenda highlights how language itself can be weaponized. The famous 7 commandments, initially a beacon of equality, are gradually and unconsciously revised, demonstrating the insidious erosion of principles under the guise of progress or necessity. This technique of unconscious revision underscores how easily even fundamental truths can be distorted. The pig's ultimate transformation into indistinguishable figures from their human oppressors serves as the ultimate ironic twist, a stark testament to the corrupting influence of power. Orwell's application of irony is not merely for amusement. It serves as a powerful tool to expose the hollowness of revolutionary ideals when absolute power is concentrated in the hands of a few. Since its publication, Animal Farm has been the subject of extensive scholarly analysis, with critics consistently recognizing its brilliance as a political allegory. The novella is widely understood as a direct critique of Stalinism and the Soviet Union descent into totalitarianism. Scholars highlight how Orwell meticulously crafted the characters and events to mirror historical realities, with Napoleon representing Joseph Stalin, Snowball embodying Leon Trotsky, and the farm animals serving as surrogates for the exploited masses. Major interpretations often focus on the corruption of power as the central theme, examining how the initial revolutionary fervor of the animals is systematically subverted by the pig's insatiable desire for control. Debates often revolve around the extent to which Orwell's critique is solely aimed at Soviet communism or if it carries broader implications for all forms of authoritarianism. The allegorical significance is deemed profound, offering a rich, easily digestible commentary on the mechanisms of totalitarian rule, making complex political machinations accessible to a wide audience. Orwell's profound disillusionment with the Soviet Union, and by extension, totalitarianism, was deeply rooted in his personal experiences and acute observations. His service in the Spanish Civil War exposed him firsthand to the brutal realities of political infighting and the manipulation of information by Soviet-backed factions. He witnessed how revolutionary movements, even those with noble initial aims, could become corrupted by propaganda and power struggles. Furthermore, during the Second World War, Orwell was a vocal critic of Soviet propaganda. recognizing its sophisticated methods of distorting truth and demonizing opposition. His essay Politics and the English Language foreshadows the critique of manipulated language seen in Animal Farm, emphasizing how vague, dishonest, and pretentious language can be used to obscure truth and justify oppressive actions. Orwell experiences instilled in him a deep skepticism towards any ideology that prioritized state power over individual freedom and truth. The enduring power of Animal Farm lies in its uncanny relevance to contemporary political discourse. Though written as a specific critique of Stalinism, the novella themes of corruption, propaganda, and the abuse of power transcend their historical origins. In the modern era, Animal Farm is frequently invoked to critique authoritarian tendencies, the manipulation of information in political campaigns, and the erosion of democratic principles. Instances where the novel allegorical figures and events are used to comment on current political situations abound, serving as a stark reminder of the cyclical nature of power and its potential for corruption. The corruption of power remains a potent and perpetually relevant theme. And Orwell's stark portrayal of how easily revolutionary ideals can be perverted for the benefit of those in control ensures that Animal Farm legacy continues to resonate, encouraging critical analysis and fostering a deeper appreciation for its enduring masterpiece. George Orwell Animal Farm stands as a monumental work within the tradition of political allegory and satire, offering a searing critique of the Russian Revolution and the subsequent rise of Stalinism. Its enduring power lies not only in its accessible narrative but also in its thematic resonance with other works that dissect the corrosive nature of power and the betrayal of revolutionary ideals. While Animal Farm offers a fable-like distillation of these themes, George Orwell's own 1984 provides a more dystopian, individual-focused examination of totalitarian control, exploring the mechanisms of surveillance, thought manipulation, and the systematic erasure of truth. Both works, however, serve as potent warnings against the concentration of unchecked power and the dangers of ideological corruption. Beyond Orwell's own oeuvre, one can draw clear parallels with novels like Yevgeny Zamyatin-Wy, which prefigures 1984 in its depiction of a rigidly controlled society, and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which, while differing in its methods of control, similarly explores the societal cost of engineered conformity and the suppression of genuine human experience. These works, through their distinct yet complementary lenses, underscore a recurring narrative in literature. They trace the fragile and often tragic journey of individualism when confronted by the brute force of power. The profound educational impact and accessibility of Animal Farm are central to its sustained relevance. Orwell masterfully crafts a narrative that, on its surface, is a simple tale of farm animals overthrowing their human oppressor. This straightforward plot, however, belies the sophisticated allegorical layers that allow it to resonate with readers of diverse ages and backgrounds. Its allegorical nature makes it an ideal text for introducing complex political concepts such as revolution, propaganda, and totalitarianism in an understandable, digestible format. The clear delineation of characters and their motivations, contrasting Napoleon cunning ambition with Snowball idealism, alongside Boxer unwavering loyalty and Squealer manipulative rhetoric, provides tangible examples for discussing abstract political dynamics. This accessibility ensures that Animal Farm remains a widely read and taught text across various educational levels, from middle school classrooms where it serves as an introduction to literary analysis and political metaphor, to university courses that delve deeper into its historical context and philosophical implications. The novel's enduring power as an educational tool stems from its ability to provoke critical thinking about power structures, social justice, and the very definition of individual freedom, making it a cornerstone in understanding the dangers of unchecked authority. At the heart of Animal Farm's chilling depiction of tyranny lies a sophisticated manipulation of language, a theme illuminated by critical linguistic analysis. The pigs, particularly Squealer, wield language as their primary weapon, transforming it into an instrument of control and deception. As Fairclough and Wodak work on critical discourse analysis suggests, language is not merely a neutral medium, but a site where power relations are constructed and maintained. In Animal Farm, Squealer pronouncements exemplify this, as he repeatedly reinterprets events, distorts facts, and employs rhetorical devices to legitimize Napoleon actions and maintain the animal's subservience. For instance, the constant revision of the 7 commandments, especially the foundational rule that all animals are equal, illustrates how language can be used to erode truth and enforce new, oppressive ideologies. The pig's narrative control, as analyzed through the lens of discourse analysis, demonstrates how the dominant group can shape perception and maintain power by controlling the flow of information and the meaning of words. This linguistic manipulation serves to suppress dissent, foster a sense of inevitability about the animal's plight, and ultimately consolidate the pig's authoritarian grip on the farm. Echoing the broader study of how language constructs social reality and reinforces power structures. Synthesizing the various threads of analysis, Animal Farm presents a tragic, coherent narrative of how a noble ideal, equality, was systematically betrayed and perverted into a tool of oppression. The initial revolution, fueled by the promise of liberation from human tyranny and the establishment of a society where all animals are equal, is a powerful testament to the desire for justice and fairness. However, this nascent ideal quickly becomes a fragile vessel, susceptible to the corrosive influence of power. The pigs, led by Napoleon, systematically exploit the animals' trust and their inherent desire for equity. Through Squealer linguistic machinations, the initial tenets of animalism are twisted and reinterpreted to serve the pig's self-interest. The concept of equality itself is gradually undermined, replaced by a hierarchy where the pigs, and later the dogs, are deemed more deserving of privilege and comfort. The arduous labor of animals like Boxer, who embodies unwavering loyalty and dedication to the revolution ideals, is ultimately exploited, highlighting the betrayal of the common animals. The transformation of the farm into a mirror of the human society it sought to escape, with Napoleon embodying the worst traits of Mr. Jones, underscores the ultimate corruption of the initial revolutionary spirit. Thus, Animal Farm serves as a profound and cautionary tale about how even the most egalitarian aspirations can be systematically dismantled and reshaped into instruments of control, ultimately demonstrating the devastating impact of unchecked ambition on the very principles it claims to uphold. Consolidating the key takeaways and overarching warnings presented by George Orwell in Animal Farm reveals a chilling prescience regarding the fragility of revolutions, the corrupting nature of unchecked power, and the insidious dangers of propaganda. The Fable, initially a potent critique of Stalinism and the Soviet Union brand of communism, transcends its historical context to serve as a universal allegory for the perennial struggle against totalitarianism and authoritarian rule. Orwell masterfully demonstrates how revolutionary ideals, however noble in their inception, can be perverted and ultimately subverted by the lust for power. The farm descent from an egalitarian utopia to a brutal dictatorship, where all animals are equal but some animals are more equal than others, serves as a stark warning. This famous rephrasing of the Animalist Manifesto, a masterful example of Orwellian doublespeak, illustrates how language itself can be corrupted to mask injustice and inequality. The pigs, led by the cunning Napoleon, systematically dismantled the principles of the revolution, employing manipulation, terror, and historical revisionism to maintain their grip on power. The subsequent conditioning of the animals to work harder for diminishing returns while the pigs luxuriate in the fruits of their labor underscores the cyclical nature of oppression, where new masters can become as tyrannical as the old. Ultimately, Animal Farm stands as a testament to the enduring human capacity for both idealism and self-destruction. Orwell work is not merely a historical commentary, but a timeless fable, a parable designed to teach a vital lesson. Power, when unchecked, inevitably corrupts. The novel implores readers to remain vigilant against the rise of authoritarianism, to question the narratives presented to them, and to recognize the subtle, insidious ways in which revolutionary fervor can be twisted into the very tyranny it sought to overthrow. Its enduring relevance lies in its stark reminder that the fight for freedom and equality is an ongoing one, requiring constant critical engagement and a profound understanding of the corrupting influence of power.